Hello everybody, I hope y'all are having a good weekend and or week depending on when I get this video out there. For all I know it's Monday and you're just beginning your week, so I hope you had a good weekend or you know that you're looking forward to the rest of the week. I just want you all to know that you honor me with your presence, and I'm your humble host, Lord Pog, and this is Lord Pog Gaming. Before we get started, I gotta do the shameless plug for the channel. If y'all like this video, go on and leave a like, please. And if I got you feeling a type of way, share and subscribe too. It really is a blessing when folks do. And while you're at it, sign my guest book. At the bottom there, if it tickles your fancy. My guest book being my comment section, of course. And with that out of the way, let's get started. When I first started this channel, I did a few retro game reviews that I've long since taken down because they lacked quality. I mean, they were bad, y'all. But my original intent for this channel was doing retro reviews. Not angry ones or walkthroughs and such, because there's infinitely better channels that are already out there doing that. I mainly just wanted to be nostalgic and share with a younger generation of gamers why I fell in love with gaming and these games in the first place. I've learned so much more about how to make a better video. Not great videos, but better. Like something you could introduce to your mother, but your dad would say needs work. And I don't really know why I'm going with that analogy, but here we go. So I'm gonna take a stab at doing retro reviews again. Here and there, this channel's not gonna be just dedicated to it like I originally thought, but I'm gonna try and do retro reviews again. So here's my retro review section, and I hope y'all like it. Today's and I'm already screwing it. Today's retro review, or as I like to call these retro review style videos, taking a little R&R. Normally R&R means rest and relaxation, but I'm kind of old, so I don't know if I'm using an old man's terms or not. But for the sake of the pun, R&R means retro and review. Look folks, if it's a lot less clever of a saying if I have to explain the pun. So if you didn't already know what R&R meant, then I suggest that instead of watching YouTube, you expand your vocabulary. I mean, why wouldn't you know what R&R means in the first place? I mean, honestly, really. So today's R&R will be looking at 1993's Soldiers of Fortune, or as it was known on PC, Chaos Engine. Now why the SNES and Sega was it called Soldiers of Fortune? I don't know. Nothing I've looked up has ever explained it, but I do, however, got a theory. Nintendo and Sega were consoles geared more towards kids, while the Amiga PC was more for adults in those days. You gotta remember the internet hadn't lashed its collar around the youth's throats yet, chaining them to its never-ending will, dragging them deeper into its pit of virtual insanity. So perhaps Nintendo and Sega thought a name like Chaos Engine was too mature sounding for kids in those days. Sounds far-fetched, I know, but let me tell you, I have a good reason for this theory based upon something else I can confirm about this game. But we'll circle back to that later on down the tracks of this crazy train. Now, Soldiers of Fortune, and I know Chaos Engine sounds way cooler, but I grew up knowing it by Soldiers of Fortune. I didn't even know the other name existed till researching for this video. It'll be too hard for my mind to not instinctively call it Soldiers of Fortune, so lay off me. Soldiers of Fortune was developed by the Bitmap Brothers, I should say, not Bitmin, but Bitmap Brothers, and published by Renegade Software. And its initial release was actually for the PC. Its Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo releases did get high marks though, and it was actually the Sega channel that first introduced my 10-year-old impressionable self to the game. I say I was 10 because that's how old I was in '93, but it could have been a year or so later because I have no way of accessing files long since deleted from my memory as a result of bad decisions as a youth. but I could have played the game like later in life, not just in '93. It's a top-down, run-and-gun steampunk meets industrial revolution England. Try and not die thrill ride. Sure, by today's standards, it's not as in-your-face as, say, Bloodborne or as stylized as Dishonored, which have a similar aesthetic. But for its day, Soldiers of Fortune, much like the Sega Channel, was ahead of its time in what it offered up, what it had to offer to the players. The developers based the game heavily on a book by William Gibson and Bruce Sterling called The Difference Engine. I'd never heard of this book until now, and because I know the plot of this game, which we're about to get into post-haste, I'm now gonna look this book up and dive down that rabbit hole. As soon as we get done here, of course. I'm not going to recite the whole plot of Soldiers of Fortune word for word. Nah, I'm just far too lazy for that. What I am going to do, though, is give y'all the plot for dummies version, as told by a dummy. And what you'll do is pretend like I didn't just call my only 2 viewers of this dummies.
You're a poppycock! You can let them do that? Thank you, Chuck Norris.
A time traveler gets clapped back to the late 1800s. England, with technology that was never meant to fall into the hands of a time period as crazy as Victorian England. And seriously, go read up on Victorian England. It was wild. Or you could watch Peaky Blinders. That works too, I guess. But we are talking about a time period in which guys like Jack the Ripper and urban legends like Spring Hill Jack were mucking about. You see what I did there? That's... Never mind. Anyway, so this baron named Fortescue, and that's the best I can do. Fortescue gets a hold of this time traveler's tech and F's around till he finds out. He creates what becomes known as the Chaos Engine, henceforth the name. And this then proceeds to create an alternate timeline where England becomes a dead zone of mutated men and beasts because the Chaos Engine is basically Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Enter our Soldiers of Fortune. Also, hence the name. 6 battle-hardened men who figure this high-risk endeavor of invading a Victorian England that's crawling with prehistoric monstrosities to, in turn, take down the Chaos Engine, must have high rewards behind it. And in a way, they're not wrong, since collecting money, or coin as it were, does play a big part in the game. We'll go more into currency, the currency system later when we talk about the gameplay and such. But for now, that's your plot, right there. Not crazily in depth, but it's an interesting story, and I like I said, I'm gonna find that book and read it because that sounds really interesting. Now, talking about our Soldiers of Fortune, there are 6 of them and they're all playable. Now, when this was first created, it was meant to be a 2-player game. Why is that important to know right now? It isn't. That's a setup for later on.
Hold your horses.
They are broken up into groups of 2, like a tier system. Basing this tier system on 3 factors, more or less. These factors are speed, strength, and expense. And what I mean by expense, I mean like what it takes to upgrade your chosen Soldier of Fortune. But again, put a pin on that last part about expense and upgrade for now. The first tier of soldiers are the Navvy and Thug. Which, when I was a 10-year-old kid, the term Navvy, it completely flew over my head. I didn't catch that at all. In fact, I don't think I even read really any of the names, to be honest, well, unless they stood out to me. However, when I was playing this recently, and I saw the word as an adult, I was confused. I thought, that's a really weird way of spelling Navy, because, I'm American and I think everything pertains to me. And it confused me even more. So I did some research, as you do, and discovered that a Navvy is not a seaman, nope, a seafaring man per se. They were engineers who built the first navigation canals at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, which this game takes place at the late stages of that. and the word actually means navigator. Which makes sense with the Navi's character, since he is in the damage tier. He's a bulky character. He's described as being particularly muscular and uses a weapon with high damage output. He is slow and expensive to maintain, however. Same thing as the other character in this tier, known as the Thug, who the game says could be the Navi's lesser intelligent brother, but is a mountain of a man with high DPS. The Thug is also slow and expensive to maintain. The second tier is more of an all-around tier, as both the Brigand and the Mercenary neither excel at anything, but they don't totally suck either. I guess games like Dark Souls really put the idea of being a jack of all trades but a master of none into perspective. If you're adequate at best at everything, then you're truly good at nothing. However, for the era that games like Soldier of Fortune came out in, an all-around styled character was used more as a learning curve, so you could get better at the game. Wow, geez, dude, I'm surprised I didn't F up my tongue on that one. Anyway, so in this case, we'll give the Brigand and the Mercenary a pass. The Brigand, see, I pointed out, twisting up my tongue, and there we... The Brigand is described as being a cutthroat, while the Mercenary is said to be a little crazy. Both have decent speed, DPS, and aren't too hard to maintain expense-wise. On our last tier, we have the Scientist and the Gentleman, who, while they have the least amount of health and weakest DPS, they have the fastest movement and cost the least amount to upgrade. But they will die easily. Like, I kid you not, the Scientist only takes like 2 shots and then he's down. The Gentleman is described as dapper and fast on his feet, a quick thinker who makes up for his shortcomings with resourcefulness. The Scientist is a funny character to talk about. Remember how I said I had a reason for why I thought maybe Sega and Nintendo thought Chaos Engine was maybe too intense for kids? Well, it's because of the Scientist. Because on the Amiga PC version of Chaos Engine, the Scientist was actually called the Preacher. I know. His description talked about how he's venturing into England to basically bring the wrath of God, but that he secretly has a perverse nature and cannot be wholeheartedly trusted. I think when the game was ported to Genesis and Super Nintendo, he was changed to the Scientist with a toned-down backstory. I think Nintendo and Sega thought that perhaps that the Preacher was maybe just a little in bad taste. Was it? I don't know, decide for yourself. The Scientist is known as the smartest of the group and has come to the English wasteland to test his powerful inventions. That's his whole story. And those are the 6 main playable characters. And I'd like to say that there's a magic combination and strategy to them, but honestly, it's more of a preference and player skill that'll determine whether or not you can make it to the end and the final showdown with the Chaos Engine itself. Like a joystick shoot 'em up, Soldiers of Fortune is a top-down spray and pray, no pun intended towards the Preacher, action game with RPG elements thrown into the mix. Players can move and shoot in complete 360-degree angles, and each soldier comes with their own unique weapon and secondary special weapon. But what was really sorta ahead of its time was the RPG mechanics and the secondary NPC follower. And that's right, Skyrim fans, I said follower. Like, no joke, no cap. What am I, 10? See, just about every game nowadays offers up some form of RPG mechanic. Anything from God of War to Red Dead Redemption will allow the player to level up with their respective protagonists. Or, in the case of God of War and Red Dead Redemption, they're more like antagonists, but I digress. In those days, though, it was more of a novelty to find a game outside of an actual RPG that allowed the player to upgrade their character in so many ways. And this is what I meant by when I said that collecting the coin dropped by downed enemies is actually profitable for the soldiers. With the currency earned by defeating enemies, players can upgrade their chosen soldiers' speed, wisdom, skill, health, their damage, and like a little bit more. Not tons more, but there's a healthy bit of options here for a game of its age. Prices vary depending on the soldier, which is why I said expense plays a big part on the player's choice of a soldier, and also some categories start maxed out and cannot be upgraded, depending on your soldier, right? So for instance, I believe the scientist begins with max speed and that can't be upgraded, and the Navi's weapon can't be upgraded, like its damage output can't be upgraded. It's already really powerful, and he does have the strongest secondary special weapon, I might also add. Now, moving on to the NPC follower, that was another pretty unique thing for its time in this game. See, Soldiers of Fortune was originally a two-player game, and two-player games in those days proved to be easier if you could invite a buddy over to play. But if you couldn't get together with anyone to play, then the game was still playable in singles action. Games like Halo 2 wouldn't introduce the AI-generated follower to help you out. Like, they're important to the plot, so they're there, and the AI is controlling them, and they're helping you out. Games like Gears of War, Halo 2, things like that. That wouldn't be a thing for like at least a decade or so. Now, while I'm sure Soldiers of Fortune wasn't the only game at the time that was doing it like this, that allowed for an AI-controlled secondary player, I can't remember off the top of my head if there were any other games necessarily doing it like this at the time. But what I will say is that Soldiers of Fortune did it extremely well for such archaic mechanics. The follower doesn't get in the way and is responsive to the enemies, laying down plenty of firepower and putting forth a decent effort to assist in mutual survivability. Their only drawback, well, not necessarily the only drawback, but their biggest drawback, something that tends to be a little bit of a nuisance. They can prove to be a little greedy, and if you're not careful, they will take all the money in each level for themselves. There is a window of opportunity to grab the money before they do, as they won't just insta-snatch every coin they find, but the window of hesitation is small, so be sure to gather resources for yourself as much as possible. But keep in mind to let your AI get resources as well. The reason this is an issue is because money is not shared, meaning that every coin collected doesn't fall into a group pool. And that feels a little inconvenient to me, since as the game progresses, the enemies become immense in number, and the last thing a player should have to worry about is if their follower is hogging all the loot, while, simultaneously making sure they get enough loot for themselves as well. It's a pain, but it's not game breaking. And the reason you want to make sure that your follower at least gets some of that loot is because you get to upgrade them as well when you upgrade yourself. Before I end the subject of game... Before I end the subject of gameplay, it's important to remember that the player only gets to spend their coin to level up every 2 levels defeated. I know that was confusing, so let me clarify. Once you pass stages 1 and 2, you will get to spend your hard-fought currency to upgrade your soldier, meaning it's every 2 stages defeated. Levels 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so on, etc., etc., etc. And I guess it's important to really remember that because you get to buy extra lives. And so if you're banking on, okay, I've got 0 lives left, I just need to make it through this level so I can buy an extra life, well, it depends on what level you're on. So play smart, strategize. And that's Soldiers of Fortune, basically in a nutshell. A fun little action RPG run and gun game that I just absolutely adored playing as a kid on the Sega Channel. And I love playing it now, really. And again, if you don't know what Sega Channel was, it was basically a TV channel dedicated to streaming games onto your Sega Genesis console, which Doesn't seem like anything in today's gaming climate, but in the 90s, it was incredibly revolutionary. So I want to give a shout out to my good buddy John LoveKing, who's been helping me look at my channel and better understand how I can make a higher quality video. He's a modding genius for games like Elder Scrolls, and I'll put a link for his channel in the description below. Go check it out. He's a great guy. Also, shout out to them old school gamers. Android, Cassid69, Icy Hot 2305, Unit 620, and AGTxThaDragonzx, who has a YouTube channel that's like a gaming podcast, and I'll leave a link to that also in the description below, so check that out too. Most importantly, thanks to everyone for stopping by. Y'all are a blessing, and I love y'all so much. Like, share, and subscribe if you like what I do here. You know, sign my guest book in the comments below, and y'all come back now, and stay golden always.
Wow! Welcome to the newest thing on television, Sega Channel. It's available now, and your cable company has it. It's the first interactive network providing video games on demand 24 hours a day. With Sega Channel, you play what you want, when you want, for as long as you want, for one low monthly price. Hi, I'm Eric Hastings, here to show you how to stop just watching TV and start playing it on Sega Channel. Now, you've heard about interactive TV before. Well, this is the real thing. Sega Channel gives you video games on demand, up to 50 different games a month. You'll be playing great games, all right at your fingertips.